If you watch the show a lot, you often hear Steve talk about the fact that universities in America seem to be getting more woke by the day. Well, here's one of the latest examples. Listen to this. Students at a private university, it's called the New School in New York City, are demanding that every student get no less than an A grade. They are also demanding that tuition not increase until 2028 and that the university president's house becomes communal property. Sounds like a bit of a socialist experiment going on at that school, right? Well, they're doing all of this while occupying a campus building. So what is actually going on here and in America's university systems overall? With me to discuss this is Professor of Political Science at Suffolk Community College in New York, as well as Campus Reform Higher Education Fellow Nicholas Giordano. Nicholas, good morning here. What in the name of higher education is going on there in New York?
Glad to be here, and it's just campus craziness. We've been witnessing this over the course of the last several years, where students will make demands upon faculty, upon administrators for some of the craziest things that you could possibly imagine, like giving all students an A. Now, the students are blaming it on a teacher strike that happened at the beginning of the semester. But demands like this, it simply reflects a growing trend of what we've been witnessing, where they think if they complain loud enough, this system will capitulate. And usually the system does. I wrote an article 2 months ago for Campus Reform explaining how students at NYU complained about a professor's course being too hard. And so NYU terminated the professor because the course was too hard. It's insanity, and it needs to end, because companies are becoming aware that students aren't really being educated. I mean, first of all, if you look at the idea of critical thinking, if the college capitulates and gives everyone an A, what does it say about all those college degrees to the corporations when these people graduate and want to get jobs? Mm-hmm. It says that they didn't earn it, they complained about it, and you could already get an idea of what type of employee they'll be. So the critical thinking skills are a problem, but it devalues our profession when we give in to demands like these. Now, so far, New School has not given in to their demands. Hopefully they don't.
So is this really an issue of woke college students, or is this really more the result in your mind of this generation of everyone gets a trophy?
You know, I look at it as a result of the entitlement culture that we've built in the United States, from the customer is always right attitude, and then that generation brought that attitude and expanded it. Instead of just complaining in retail outlets, they began complaining to teachers about their child's grade in the K through 12 system. And administrators would often oblige to the parents and change students' grades, even though they didn't deserve those grades. So I'm not sure that it's essentially the woke culture. I think that obviously plays a role, but I think it has more to do with the lack of personal responsibility in this country, the lack of accountability anymore, and that when we look at the generations coming up, they haven't been trained to deal with change, to be able to remain flexible and adapt to changing environments. They think they could have everything catered to them. Unfortunately, that's not how the real world works.
Traditionally, colleges or places of higher education are places of rebellion, places of critical thinking, as you raised earlier on. But has that, in your mind, given way to this woke culture as we describe it? What are you seeing in the college landscape these days?
Absolutely, it has. And I think that if we just look at the coronavirus, you know, younger people were meant to rebel against the system. That's the way it always was. Yet when it came to something like shutting colleges down, forcing students into isolation, forcing them to get vaccinated and wear masks, we didn't see any real pushback from the student body. And it's because many of them have been trained to simply be obedient and compliant within the system, and they conform to everything within the system. And that's an unfortunate thing, because in America, we have a culture where the younger people are supposed to have this rebellious streak, yet we don't see it. Instead, they make these authoritarian demands. We see them shut down speaking engagements for speakers that have a differing point of view from them. We've seen colleges implement speech codes at the behest of the student body. We've seen colleges create safe spaces at the behest of the student body. So colleges are no longer a place where students are being prepared to enter the workforce, to enter the real world. And unfortunately, the woke culture has taken over this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we all have to have equal outcomes, which is just not going to happen in life. It's an impossibility. And the solution is actually simple. All we have to do is say no, right? Just say no to the student body, say no to the demands they make, especially when those demands are either irrational demands or authoritarian demands. And we have to remember who's in charge at the colleges and universities, and it's administrators and faculty members, not the student body.
But isn't saying no just a Band-Aid to the issue? Don't we need to focus on what promulgated the issue itself, what promulgated this cultural shift, if you will?
Well, unfortunately, that's where the faculty is responsible. I mean, a lot of these, the crazy thinking, the crazy logic today has come out of the college campuses, from the professors, from the university system, and it's trickled down and infected all aspects of our society. And that's part of the problem that we have with academia, is that they operate in a world of theory where the world moves at a different pace. Unfortunately, these theories are now harming our society. It's actually harming our culture. So if you want to talk about something like critical race theory at the college level, that's fine. These are young adults that should be able to think for themselves. However, when we're trickling it down in the K through 12 system, well, they haven't developed the skills necessary to push back against teachers. They haven't developed the skills necessary to hone their arguments, to look for factual information. And that's where it's become solely about indoctrination. And I think that's why we see this two-pronged problem where students are overly compliant with the government demands, yet at the same time, they want government to take this harsher authoritarian stance on issues that they care about.
So let me ask you a bit of more theoretical question. Do we need university system reform, if you will, broader reform? And I ask this question kind of in the context of the fact that one of the ways professors, similar to yourself, make their money is by research, coming up with documents, writing literature that's compelling, that's provocative, even if they don't necessarily believe it. The whole point is to be provocative, to get more eyes and to get funding. Is that part of the fundamental issue then?
Well, I think there's three problems. So the first problem is the university pipeline itself, right? So you have professors, they go get their undergraduate degree, then they get their grad degrees and the PhDs, and then they go right into the classroom. So they never had any real world experience. They've been in academia in that groupthink bubble for so long, and that's why you see the biases that exist within them. So I think that's a problem. I think every college professor should have some real world experience. The second issue is the grant funding itself. So a lot of the grant money is now coming from government, and government gets to dictate what they want the results to be, right? If you're a professor and you want to challenge, let's say, climate change orthodoxy, you're never going to get grant funding for that. And that's become a real problem, because what we see is that the grant process has been ideologically weaponized. The third problem that exists is the fact that you have a whole bunch of professors at the university level. So I teach at the community college level. I'm actually in the classroom teaching my 7 loads of classes. At the university level, it is based on research. That's how you make a name for yourself. That's how you make money. And what happens is they hardly teach classes, so they're out of touch with the classroom. They have a bunch of teachers that will teach the classes and grade the papers, as they're forced to focus on research, where the conclusions of that research are already baked into the cake.
All right, so I'm curious, in your mind, is there still a benefit to going to university or college then?
Well, it depends on the subject field you're going to study. So if you are going to college to get a degree in gender studies or basket weaving, I would say take a pass and save yourself a hell of a lot of money. If you're going to school to become a teacher or a police officer, just pay attention to the college you're going. There's no point in taking $60,000, $70,000 in student loans out of these professions. If you're going for medical or engineering, you have to go to college. You don't have a choice. You have to go through a 4-year university system and go to schooling after that. I think that everyone should start off at the community college level. I think it benefits the students, the parents. Tons of money is saved. It's not as ideological as the 4-year university campuses. So I think everyone should start at the community college level. And I also think that we shouldn't dismiss the idea of trades. I mean, we have great vocational training in the community college level, where you could get access to academics and learn skills and trades as well.
Professor, I have to admit, I was secretly hoping that your answer would simply be, forget about it, forget about it. Didn't happen, and I appreciate your response either way. Thanks so much for being here with us. Happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, we'll talk.